see.
Oh my God. Well, it's really not that cold. I have a t-shirt on. Well, I was usually shorts. You go to school with shorts and flip-flops. What do they call that? What do you call them? That translates into call. There's art. Wanda? Any update on Wanda?
Yes. The oh yeah.
Thousands of dollars worth of candy and stuff. Lifesaver lollipops and chocolate bars for the this year. Guilty. And
All right, dear ones, it's about time to begin. Good to see you. I've had a couple of comments or questions tonight about the directory and directions to members' homes where they're located. I should tell you that the online presence that we have has an app for your phone, and you can sign into the directory if you've got your phone. And it also attaches to the map, so you can say, take me to Scott's house, and it'll navigate you to Scott's house. So I haven't been printing the directory, and I probably should, but if you want a little tutoring on how to get that app and get going with it, it's really helpful, and you have access to lots of things online. We could talk about them, but I just don't normally mention it. We're continuing with our lessons on the Psalter tonight, the song book of the Bible. And so this is our fourth lesson on the subject. We've introduced it. We've talked about genre. And so we're getting started with this, and we want to keep going. Tonight I want to talk to you about poetry, just in general, what poetry looked like in the Old Testament in Hebrew. I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but I can tell you a little bit about it. And then we want to look at a couple of the Psalms as well, and Psalm 1 will be one that we'll look at. Remember, when we're talking about genre, a word that just means category, it's kind of a fancy word meaning a category or class of anything, I guess, but with respect to this, the Psalms can be sorted into different bins, and we've looked at those bins, and we have these, and these are arbitrary divisions. There's overlap in these, and certainly there could be others as well, but we have seen the different genres. We looked at examples of each of these, and one of the tricks in using the Psalms effectively is knowing how to find the one you need when you need it, the type you need when you need it. And so that's something that it's good to have a guide to do. We talked about the origin of the Psalms last time before the singing, and I guess last time it was. So the books of the Psalm arranged this way into 5 sub-books, and it seems like through the years they've been kind of collected and sorted about, and they're not in any order, especially considering the type. But we did talk about how in general the beginning of the book has more laments, and the laments kind of fade as you get towards the end of the book, and the end of the book has a lot more of the hymns of praise. And so in general, as you're working through the book, it's taking you from sorrow up to joy, and a lot of the Psalms do that as well. They'll start off with a heavy lament, and they'll leave you in some encouraged place. So that's a general comment on the structure or the order of the Psalms. We find a great deal of poetry in the Bible. Now, we often call this section the section of wisdom, but we could call it the section of poetry as well. Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, all poetry. Where else do we find poetry? If you've got a Bible, you can kind of turn through, and you can tell by the way it's laid out on the page. If you look, for instance, at the book of Isaiah, it tends to be mostly poetry, except where it does jump into a narrative in the center, and then it goes back to poetry. And so, with most of the prophets. So most of the prophets are in poetry as well, the prophetic messages that we find listed for us. The Song of Moses in Exodus chapter 15 is a song and is a poem. There are others as well in a number of the books. So the Old Testament is very heavy with poetry. And, okay, but what is poetry and why is it there? Those are the kinds of questions we're going to go after tonight. But just know that we're not only talking about the wisdom books when we talk about poetry, it's in almost half of the Old Testament. Listen to this. We've talked about this before. We're going to talk about it a little more. Listen to the rhythm, the flow, what we're talking about, how we're talking about it with Psalm 1. How blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He will be like a tree firmly planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. And in whatever he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but they are like chaff which the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. The first psalm, a gateway to the psalm, a wisdom psalm, by the way, in terms of its genre. So you can kind of hear how that falls on your ear. Now let's compare that to the start of the book of Leviticus. And really all I'm wanting you to do is hear the difference between these. Then the Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, When any man of you brings an offering to the Lord, you shall bring your offering of animals from the herd or the flock. If his burnt offering, or if his offering is a burnt offering from the herd, he shall offer it a male without defect. He shall offer it at the doorway of the tent of meeting, that he may be accepted before the Lord. He shall lay his hand on the head of the burnt offering, that it may be accepted for him to make atonement on his behalf. He shall slay the young bull before the Lord, and Aaron's sons, the priests, shall offer up the blood and sprinkle the blood around the altar, and the altar that is at the doorway of the tent of meeting. Do you just hear how different those are? Do you hear how it's kind of, the first Psalm 1 was kind of flowery and painting word pictures for you and describing things in a creative way. And then in Leviticus, this is a straight narrative. We're just talking, we're just giving you information. We're saying, here's what you got to do and how you got to do it. So just, you can hear the difference between poetry and prose in the scriptures. It's pretty easy to do. Notice how poetry repeats ideas. It'll say it again a little differently. It uses that technique of repeating something to stress it. And it also uses picturesque language. He's like a tree planted by a river, and his leaf doesn't wither. Okay, I could kind of see that. So I wanted to show you that because what we generally think of as poetry, our Old Testament poetry doesn't look like what we think poetry is, but we got to deal with it. Old Testament poetry a little differently than we deal with our poetry. We talked about where we find poetry in the Bible. Now let's talk about why. Why do we have poetry in the Bible? I mean, this is whittling a little bit on God's end of the stick. He put it in there, so, I mean, yeah, that would be an answer, and I'd have to give you full credit on that, because God put it in the Bible. Okay, but why did God put it in the Bible? Let's see if we can figure it out. I don't know, I've mentioned, I think, before, Tremper Longman. He's got a great book about how to read the Psalms. And in there, he says, if the Bible reveals the truth concerning God, people in the world, important things, right? God, people in the world, why isn't that truth communicated to us in a straightforward prose style? Why didn't he write Psalms the same way they wrote Leviticus? Why do it so differently? Well, first of all, let's talk about what poetry is, and we'll try to sneak up on that why question. Some poetry is easy to read, and I've shared this poem with you before. It's one of my favorites, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, A Psalm of Life. Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returneth, was not written of the soul. So, in our poetry, this, a great example, I think, of kind of a classic poetry, if a simple form, there's meter. Like in our songbook, you know, there's a metric index to talk about the number of syllables in each line, and you can talk about it that way, in the way it falls on your ear. I don't know if you've ever done it. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound, that's 8. That saves a wretch like me, that's 6. I once was lost, but now am found, that's 8. Was blind, but now I see, that's 6. So 8, 6, 8, 6. And, you know, the meter in this is similar. You can count. Tell me not in mournful numbers, 8. Life is but an empty dream, 6, 8, 6, 8, 6. So you can do that. Some poetry that we have is like this, but I'll tell you what, some poetry is not so easy to read. This is from Astrophel and Stella. Loving in truth and fain in verse my love to show, that she, dear she, might take some pleasure of my pain. Pleasure might cause her read. Reading might make her know. Knowledge might pity win, and pity grace obtain. I sought fit words to paint the blackest face of woe. Studying inventions fine, her wits to entertain, oft turning others' leaves to see if thence would flow some fresh and fruitful showers upon my sunburned brain. Okay, that's a little tougher. We got to go back over that one to get what's coming out of that. But, you know, that's a little different kind of poetry, and the meter and the rhyme doesn't quite, work the same. There's great differences in our kinds of poetry, and, that's just the tip of the iceberg. But getting back to this question, why do we find poetry in the Bible? Well, we already talked about where. I guess I was out of order there a little bit. Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Lamentations, and so much of the prophets. Psalm 1, we've already looked at that twice now. I want you to look with me at Exodus chapter 14 and then chapter 15. This is interesting because these are successive chapters. We're going to look at Exodus 14 first, And then we're going to look at Exodus chapter 15. And what I want to show you is that these are talking about the same event, but they're talking about it in a very different way. And I want you to notice how this falls on your ear. A lot tonight, I'm asking you to just listen to how this sounds. But here in Exodus 14:26, then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may come back over the Egyptians. You know, this is just after they've crossed over the Red Sea on dry ground, and they're safe on the other side, over their chariots and their horsemen. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal state at daybreak, while the Egyptians were fleeing right into it. Then the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, even Pharaoh's entire army that had gone into the sea after them. Not even one of them remained. But the sons of Israel walked on dry land through the midst of the sea, and the waters were like a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. So there it is in prose, in straight narrative. Now, on the other side, safely there, Moses sings his song of victory. Listen to how this sounds. Then Moses, the sons of Israel, sang this song to the Lord. He said, I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him, my father's God, and I will extol him. The Lord is a warrior. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he cast into the sea, and the choicest of his officers are drowned in the Red Sea. The deeps cover them. They went down into the depths like a stone. You see how much more dramatic that is, and how it kind of gets you going a little bit, more than the straight narrative that was talking about the same thing. This one is using imagery. They were thrown like a stone. In chapter 14, it didn't say anything about there being like a stone, just told what happened. This one's saying that God is great. It's implied in what was written in 14, but it's stated here in a glorious way, a couple of glorious ways in chapter 15. So you can kind of see the difference then between straight prose narration and poetry. And so now I've chased around this question a number of times. Why is it in there? It's in there. Poetry's in the Bible because it hits us differently. It should connect better. It should resonate with us. It should go to our heart a little bit better and a little bit stronger than just the prose would do. It engages us. It pumps us up. And so the Lord's chosen to use that inspired word when it comes to certain things that he's trying to convey to us, a lot of the Old Testament. All right, so I've done a lot of talking. How about questions or comments so far?
Well, that song, number one that you read, you probably remember. I like to read that, every occasionally. And that is really a song of contrast.
It's right.
And so is the other one that you referenced here, the one in earlier, I can't remember, in Market, but it also is a song of sort of contrast.
Yes. Many of the wisdom psalms will say, here's how your life is going to be if you live in a godly way, and here's how your life is going to be if you live in an ungodly way. So which do you want? Make up your mind. Choose your path. 73 was one that I really liked and we read before. I don't know if that's the one you're referring to, but we've got this poetry because it gets us going. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. So
I mentioned this too last time. In my Bible, in the end, it has where to get help in the Psalms, and there's about
right.
90 different subjects that you, and there, I mean, there may not be one, there may not be one that you want to look up, but there, at any rate, there's 90 subjects, and it can tell you where to go to the Psalms for information about it.
That's right. And those helps are very useful. It's good to have a roadmap when you're looking for a particular type of psalm or a psalm that's going to help you in a particular situation. So
a lot of the psalms that are very helpful, for us here. Like there's a one about leadership, and there's one about money and how to handle money, and one about prayer, or several about prayer, several about each of those. And there's just a lot of good subjects in there that when you have some question, you may find the answers right there.
exactly. And find it in a way that kind of reaches into your heart and connects and gets you, encouraged and pumped up a little bit. I really think that's a big part of what's going on. Well, I gave you some examples of our poetry and just tip of the iceberg, but I've kind of told you that their poetry doesn't look like that. But what does it look like? Let's see if we can figure out what it does look like. Old Testament poetry often contains parallelism. And that's what we're going to talk about a lot next time. And by the way, in the bulletin this past week, I put a page in there, I think it's page 7, that has some different types of parallelism. We're going to go through those next time and try to get a handle on it. But let's look at a couple of examples. We'll further define it first. Parallelism refers to correspondence between phrases in lines of poetry. So you'll look at a line, and then the next line says kind of the same thing, but a little bit differently. Generally, that's parallelism, and sometimes it'll switch things around. It'll have the same A and B, the two parts on a line, but it'll be B and A the next time. And that's a kind of a parallelism. Verse 2 of Psalm 1. But his delight is in the law of the Lord. So this man that we're talking about, this godly man, his delight is in the law of the Lord. In the law, he mentions the law again. Well, now the law is in the first part. He meditates day and night, which is kind of what is practically delighting in the psalm. So here's one of those examples. The delight is in the law of the Lord. The law of the Lord, he meditates in it day and night. So we've talked about the same thing in two different lines, and we flipped it around. That's a kind of parallelism. Look at Psalm 20. May the Lord answer you in the day of trouble. May the name of the God of Jacob set you securely on high. Do you see how those are kind of a straight parallelism? The Lord, in the second line, the name of the Lord, just slightly different. Answer you in the day of trouble, set you securely on high in the second part of each of those. That's kind of the same thing. Answering you is setting you in a high place. So he said the same thing twice, parallelism. Notice it doesn't have a meter. It's like count the syllables, not really anything there. It doesn't have any rhyme because it's been translated or because there wasn't any rhyme in the first place, because it's more of a thought poetry than a audio poetry. So think about that, thought poetry. We're watching what he's saying and how the patterns progress in what he's saying. Look at Psalm number 6. O Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger, nor chasten me in your wrath. The first part is addressing the Lord in the first line there. But then there's no real first part in the second one that pairs up with that. It's just stating the second clause in the first line is a different way for the second line. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for I am pining away. Heal me, O Lord, for my bones are dismayed. There's that straight parallelism again. Once you're tuned in to know what parallelism is and know what it looks like, you'll really start to see it, and you'll see the different kinds of it. That's kind of what we're going for. It's just for you to be able to recognize it. We mentioned parallelism. That's a hallmark of Old Testament poetry. Another one is imagery. Using a picture, a thought picture, drawing a picture for us instead of just stating it. Psalm 1. How blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked. So you could see a guy walking along, talking to bad people, standing in the path of sinners. So now he's just kind of standing there with worse people, I guess, but then finally sitting in the seat of scoffers. And you can picture a guy just sitting down with a bunch of the worst fools that there are, the scoffers. And so notice also the progression in the wrong direction. Is that a declination, I guess? But he was walking, and then he was just standing, and then he sat down. And the groups that he's with are worse each time. So he's gone the wrong way. And he's gone the wrong way in a way you can almost see. And so there's a kind of imagery there. We already mentioned the tree part of that. The tree by the water and leaf blooms and has fruit in its season. That's a beautiful picture of what righteousness is in a spiritual sense. Psalm 23, instead of just talking about the Lord and his attributes, he said, he's my shepherd. All right, I can picture that, especially in an agricultural, agrarian society. You'd have a much better connection there. We don't see our sheep too much. We don't see anybody's sheep too much. I don't know why it came to mind, but I was over in Germany, Vilseck, Germany, at the army base. I was teaching there one time on the way to Germany, and I was with a family that I had met in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And they had a young fella in the family, and he was in the back seat. We were driving along, and a flock of sheep went in front of us with a guy leading, and he goes, "Oh, look, a German Shepherd." I said, "Oh, that's a good one. I'll remember that. German Shepherd." Yeah, the Lord's my shepherd. The German Shepherd over there. "Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." For years, I thought this meant I don't know why you don't want him as your shepherd. That sounds like a good thing. No, it's, okay, he's such a good shepherd. I've got everything I need. I don't want for anything. It took me a long time to figure that one out. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. You may not be in a pasture or by a brook, but just conjuring that up in these pictures with these images brings a measure of peace. It kind of slows you down, and you're reading this, and it settles us and connects with us. So notice the imagery that's used. It will tell you with a word picture instead of just saying plainly what he's talking about. Psalm 29. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. Yes, the Lord breaks in pieces the cedars of Lebanon. So now we've taken the same phrase and we've kind of extended it a little bit further. He breaks the cedars. Yes, he breaks in pieces the cedars of Lebanon. So we've described each of those key words there, the verb and the noun with a little more modification there. He makes Lebanon skip like a calf, and Syrian like a young wild ox. And so you get this picture. So you're looking for parallelism, structure in the lines. You're looking for a picture in the lines. And that's really what you're keying in on when we're looking at poetry. So to come back to this question, why? Why do the Psalms, why does the Old Testament contain so much poetry? Well, parallelism and imagery connect with the heart. Poetry moves us in ways that prose does not typically. Prose can be meaningful, but poetry tends to move us more. And what we don't have before us, but we know is part of this equation, is the music. And that's another level of this. When we take a psalm that's written in poetic form, that's ready to connect with us, and we sing it, and we all sing it together, that should connect and get us going in a little bit, in a very effective way. So.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Imagery. You're talking about imagery. You're talking about Daniel, Ezekiel, Revelation. Is that poetry as well? Because a lot of imagery, you're talking about things, some things we don't even know, but some of horses, different things throughout their books and things.
A really good test to see if it's poetry is to just look at how it's laid out on the page in your Bible. Let's look at Revelation and see. Grab a Bible and look at it and see, is it set off like the Psalms are?
Some is 18, 19. Some are. Certainly are in poetic structure.
Right, okay. Chapter 15, just like in Exodus chapter 15, the Song of Moses again listed there. And so that definitely is quoting a psalm, and or saying there's a new psalm. Yeah.
4, 5, 4 and 5. Yeah.
So, well, I guess what you're getting at too, Hamer, is that you notice the imagery there, even if it isn't technically poetry, it's full of imagery. And so that's a hallmark of the apocalyptic literature. Those things that talk about the end times, Daniel, Ezekiel, Revelation, tend to have a lot of image, draw us a picture. I guess because it's so hard to technically explain it, or we wouldn't understand it anyway.
Yeah, because you want that song, you understand what they're saying, right? Once you get into Daniel and Ezekiel and Revelation, you're talking about imagery that we don't know about. It's kind of confusion. But in the first song, or whatever the other books are, you can get exactly what you're trying to say. But those books, it's like, you get 100 different people, you get 100 different interpretations, right?
Yeah.
So the imagery there doesn't explain it clearly like you think it should. Maybe the early church, maybe they knew exactly what they're talking about. But when we're looking backwards, we still can't figure out everything that was saying in the imagery.
Yeah.
That's confusing.
Yeah. We notice the way God has told us about these future events being different than the historical, the straight narrative way, and so we're mindful that He's done it differently. And certainly it's purposeful as well. You know, if you wanted to take a recent historical event and write it in the way the Revelation does, you know, like you could, isn't Russia's symbol a bear? Is that the animal that's associated with Russia? And I don't know what the Ukraine would be, you know, pardon me? A trident. So the bear bit the trident and swiped at it with his mighty claw. You could say something like that, and you could paint a picture for what's happening. Or you could say, in February, Russia invaded Ukraine and has been trying ever since to take over part of the country. So, you know, God has taken purposefully in the book of Revelation the specific names of the parties involved and the specific dates that things are going to happen, and made it very general so that it's something that we can use and be encouraged by without having all the details that he didn't want to share. Talking about past events in the Psalms, as we mentioned before on the origin of the Psalms, the specific event is often, the specifics of the event that gave the occasion for the writing of the psalm are not in there. You know, specifically in Psalm 32, Psalm 51, about the adultery and the other sins that David had committed, he doesn't mention adultery in that psalm. He doesn't mention the other sins he's committed. He just says he has enemies and he has sinned, you know, without specifying the sin. And when he does that, even if we haven't committed adultery, we can use that psalm effectively because the specifics are out of it. So keeping it general makes it so it's applicable for us and useful for us. So, yeah. Yeah, Scott.
At a different congregation many years ago, I was talking to an elder and mentioned some of the hymns that I really love to sing, that they just meant something to me. And he said, well, you know, we sing to the Lord not for our own entertainment, but to glorify and magnify God. And I just walked away from that and I just thought, how ignorant are you about the purpose of hymns? And I thought that very sincerely, because yes, they are to glorify and to worship and to magnify God, but they either bring us closer to Him in how they touch our hearts and our feelings and our emotion, or as you just mentioned, as like an atonement and as seeking forgiveness as well in words and music. Am I wrong in that, or I just think there's something more than just the mechanics of a Gregorian chant that is meaningful only to the listener, to God Himself, and that there's something more there that, like you say in the poetry of the psalm, that it brings us closer in our worship to God as we approach the throne or the altar.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. You know where this is, right? Colossians 3:16. Teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. Yeah, okay, I'm singing to God in many of these, but I'm teaching and I'm admonishing, and because it's music generally, I'm encouraging. So, yeah, the Lord is hitting on all sorts of accomplishing many purposes simultaneously with this. Not all songs are praise songs, but some of them are. Some we're singing especially to Him, but even when we express our praise to Him, that's encouraging to us as well. So
some are mournful about Christ's crucifixion.
Yeah,
Others are,
yeah.
Thanksgiving.
yeah,
I just think that that's one of the reasons why I've never gotten anything out of going to a worship service where there's a choir singing to me or an organ playing or a band that is, I can watch that on television, but when I participate in that, it's a whole lot more meaningful to the person who's singing. And so I don't know, maybe I'm being kind of an iconoclast, but it just seems like the singing part of it has always touched me more as a worshiper
yeah, yeah.
than hearing it.
Yeah, it's a very fundamental and important point that a lot of people miss. Haymarket?
I was traveling, I was in Denver for 2 weeks, leadership training in Denver. So Sunday they had a Denver Church of Christ and everything, right? So like you said, I thought all Church of Christ went about Colossians 3:16 and Ephesians 5:19, no instrument of music and stuff, right? So this guy, he was in Church of Christ, he was going with me, and he said, oh yeah, Denver Church of Christ. So I went in there, and it came out instrument of music, ladies leading, singing and all that stuff. So it's not the Church of Christ, I'm telling you guys. And I was like, but because he said, why we can't have instrument, went to those verses, right? But like Scott said, it doesn't do anything for me because it's more like entertainment. I want entertainment. I turn on my radio, listen, Christian music I might have, whatever, and different music, but you go to the Bible, I was telling them, you go to the Bible, when the church was established in Acts 2, all throughout the New Testament, there's nowhere to say about instrument music. Because everybody got to understand, God looked at your heart, and some people, you don't have instrument pianos and everything, music. Some people only go to that congregation, but they look at it, instead of worshiping God, as Brother Scott said, they look at it as entertainment. Church Christ is boring. You come to church to worship God, or you come to be entertained? That's the question you have to ask.
That's it. And I think you'll find that if we do it the way the Lord's prescribed, it will be fulfilling. It'll be more fulfilling. When you listen to a trumpet play Amazing Grace, I don't care how beautiful the trumpet is, it's not conveying an idea. It doesn't have a meaning unless you know the words to the song and you're thinking the words, well then even why is the trumpet there? And another thing that we used to do in the Episcopalian choir, ex favilla judecandos homo reus, we would sing in all of these, different languages that I didn't know. And you think, well, this is pleasing God because I'm singing this, but I have no idea what I'm saying. And nobody else has any idea what I'm saying. So why are you saying it? This is 1 Corinthians 14. You're familiar with 1 Corinthians 14? Turn there real quick. Verse 6, now brothers, if I come to you speaking in tongues, how will it benefit you unless I bring you some revelation or knowledge or prophecy or teaching? Even if lifeless instruments such as the flute or the harp do not give distinct notes, how will anyone know what is played? And if the bugle gives an indistinct sound, who will get ready for battle? So with yourselves, if with your tongue you utter speech that is not intelligible, how will anyone know what is said? You'll be speaking into the air. There are doubtless many different languages in the world, and none without meaning. But if I do not know the meaning of the language, I'll be a foreigner to the speaker, and the speaker a foreigner to me. And so going on from there, in verse 15, what am I to do? I will pray with my spirit, but I will pray with my mind also, understanding. Some other translations say, I will sing praise with my spirit, but I will sing with my mind, understanding also. If I don't know what is being said, it goes on to say in verse 16, otherwise, if you give thanks with your spirit, how can anyone in the position of an outsider say amen to your thanksgiving when he does not know what you're saying? So, 17. For you may be giving thanks well enough, but the other person is not being edified. The other person is not being built up if they don't know the words to the amazing grace that you're just playing with your trumpet. So, yeah. But, Jeremy Hodges, that's come over here a number of times, that preaches at Wildercroft, has a real interesting story. He was a member of the church, and he fell away for a while. And while he was away, he was a roadie on a rock band, and he, on his way back, trying to reconnect with the Lord, went to a lot of these services that have of their denominations that have a band up front. And he said at one point it hit him, the same mechanics that they used to get the crowd going in the rock band were what the church was doing. And he said it's just so obvious to him, having spent some time with the rock band, that, when they're getting ready to do the altar call, the bass guitar starts in the back or something, and the music starts to swell, and they're just orchestrating a moment, a response in you to what they're doing. So, yeah, I don't know. It's I don't know how we got on that. There we were. I guess there's nobody downstairs tonight? I don't think there is. So, okay. Let's just move right into then the devotion part. We don't have to wait for anybody.
First song will be 773. Oh, how sweet will be to meet the Lord when he comes in glory by and by. What a song of praise shall we outpour when he comes in glory by and by. How sweet will be when he comes in the sky. What joy 'twill be when he comes in glory by and by. We will have our robes all white as snow when he comes in glory by and by. Oh, be ready with the Lord to go when he comes in glory by and by. How sweet 'twill be when he comes in the sky. What joy 'twill be when he comes in glory by and by. I am longing for that happy day when he comes in glory by and by. For with him I hope to soar away when he comes in glory by and by. How sweet 'twill be
invitation will be 829. 829.
For the short talk tonight, I want to talk to you about Barabbas and me. Barabbas and me. You know the name Barabbas, don't you? Turn with me to Matthew 27. Matthew chapter 27. I want to read 7 verses for you there. This is the last part of Jesus' interaction with Pilate leading up to his crucifixion. Matthew 27, beginning in verse 20. Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?" They all said, "Let him be crucified." And he said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So, when Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I'm innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." And all the people answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." Then he released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. An account you've read often, but an aspect of that I bet you haven't considered before. I hadn't considered it before I heard this recently. Picture Barabbas sitting in his cell, already having been sentenced to die on the cross, knowing that this day was the day that was going to happen. Imagine, and I don't think it's hard to imagine, that he can't see exactly what's going on from his cell, and so he's just listening. What does he hear? Figure he can't hear Pilate. All he can hear is what the crowd is saying. So he's just sitting in his cell and he hears the whole crowd scream, "Barabbas!" Okay, your ears pick up. What are you talking about? What does he hear next? "Let him be crucified." Oh man. And then he hears the same thing again. "Let him be crucified." And now he's sitting and he's waiting for that to happen. And just imagine how you'd be squirming knowing that the whole crowd is calling for that. Knowing that you're guilty, know that you did the crime, and you've been sentenced. And then you hear the guard approaching the door. And how surprised would you be when you learn you're being set free, not taken to the cross? I wonder how much later he figured out why he had been delivered and how, and who it was that kind of went in his place. You wonder if he dug into that to get the answer. Hey, why am I free now? I expected to be crucified. Did he know anything previously about Jesus? Did he seek at that point to find something out about him? And as a free man now, because of what transpired, how did he live? What did he do with that freedom that he shouldn't have had? When he realized he should have died and he didn't, and there was one who set him free. I don't recommend movies much, but I did see Saving Private Ryan in the theaters when it came out, and it's been a very moving experience to see that movie. But that moment at the end when he realizes that he's free and he's alive that day because of heroic efforts by others and the overwhelming. What are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that? Of all the characters in the Bible, the one that I expected to have nothing in common with is Barabbas, but we've got so much in common with Barabbas. We've committed the crime of sin, and we stood to die for it. Knowing our guilt, we could expect condemnation, but we're freed from that, released from that, because of what Jesus did. The same way that Barabbas was freed by Jesus, we're freed by Jesus. And so, knowing that we have got Barabbas as our brother to a degree, what do we do with that? How do we live knowing that we've been spared because of what he did? It's hard to just walk away from that and pretend it didn't happen or that it doesn't concern me. I think the proper response is to be obedient to the gospel, to arise and walk in newness of life and go on trying to live every day, holding fast to the standard that he set for us. That's what's appropriate. And if that's something that you need to do tonight, we invite you to come. Let us help you do that while we stand, while we sing.
829. Careless soul, why will you linger, wandering from the fold of God? Hear you not the invitation? Oh, prepare to meet thy God. Careless soul, heed the warning, for your life will soon be gone. Oh, how sad to face the judgment, unprepared to meet thy God. Why so thoughtless are you standing while the fleeting years go by, and your life is spent in folly? Oh, prepare to meet thy God. Careless soul, oh, heed the warning, for your life will soon be gone. Oh, how sad to face the judgment, unprepared to meet thy God. If you spurn the invitation till the Spirit shall depart, then you'll see your sad condition, unprepared to meet thy God. Careless soul, heed the warning, for your life will soon be gone. Oh, how sad to face the judgment, unprepared to meet thy God. We appreciate the attendance of everybody this evening. Anybody know where the regular Wednesday night crew is?
I've got a bunch of announcements, so yeah.
Oh, you do have a lot of them?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll turn it over to Jeff
Yeah.
and he can tell us about that.
Yeah, Art's been keeping track of Wanda. Do you want to share the news on Wanda? That you?
Well,
Okay, yeah. So was having some sort of respiratory, I think, problem that kept her out of services a couple weeks, but she's been x-rayed, and the x-ray didn't show anything of terrible concern. So we expect she's going to be recovering, but she's still, she's feeble. So Pray for her. Both of the Sutphins, Richard and Georgiana, have COVID, have been diagnosed with that, but Monday night she still participated in the study that we have via Zoom, and she said it's not too bad for them. They're kind of just feeling like they have colds, so it could be worse. They're doing okay. Fairly mild symptoms, it seems like. Randy Allen got a call today from his sister saying that his mom's fading pretty fast, and so he's driving down to Georgia even now as we speak, trying to get there, but seems like her systems are shutting down. Her name is Laverne Barong, so we want to be praying for him and for her. And that changes the dynamics of the study that we typically have at his house on Thursday. Tomorrow night's study is just going to be via Zoom at 7:30, the typical meeting ID that we always use at 7:30 tomorrow night for our study for Randy. The Beans are away. Mark at the corporate headquarters in Colorado, and Chris went down to Florida. On the bulletin board, there are 3 meetings that are posted. 2 of them are this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I can sure vouch for the one in Dulles. Steve Wolfgang is one of the best teachers we've got. And so if you can get up there to hear Steve Wolfgang, I know you won't be disappointed. The other fella I just don't know, but I'm sure they'll be fine. This is the time of year when, in the past few years, Clint and I would have been putting our heads together trying to figure out the theme for the next year. So let me open that up to all of you. If you've got any ideas, I think in the bulletin this Sunday I'll put all the themes that we've had in the past few years. But if you've got an idea for what we could use as a theme in 2023, feel free to share that with me. And I guess most urgently, just 2 days from now, our sister Lori has her surgery. And it's an extensive surgery, and it's going to be a long recovery. And so we want to pray for the hands that are ministering to them. So thankful when we need somebody like this that can take care of our complex problems, that a guy's been studying all his life to be able to do that and is willing to do it. Pray for all those that are assisting the surgeon. Pray for that Lori's body works with the process and heals appropriately. For all those that will be caring, her family will be caring for her and all of that. So please do be praying for that. Okay, that's what I had for announcements. What did I miss?
One other thing about Sister Wanda, some time ago, she received a card from somebody at church, and she was really taken back by that. And she mentioned that, I don't know if you were there at the time or not, but she mentioned receiving that card. And it'd be nice if people could make an effort to send Sister Wanda a card.
Yeah.
It really, I think, would really mean a lot to her.
I can't recall if I put her in the directory, but we've talked about the directory a bunch. I'll print some of those off tomorrow, and I'll get that address. I think we do have her address. Yeah, we have it. So let's get that out so people can do that. It is a very effective thing. Hamer?
And she's feeling well. She that's what her and Emma here tonight.
She was down Sunday too, right? Yeah.
She did some blood tests. She's waiting for those to come back and everything, but she's not 100% herself.
Sister Angela too. All right. Sorry to hear that. All right. If nothing further, Brother Sean, got a closing prayer.
Lord, we thank you again for this evening, the time we got together to finish your study and to learn more about the things that you've written for us. Pray we take these things to our hearts and our minds and we meditate upon them and apply them to our lives. Help us to better understand thee and thy will and the wisdom that you have written, that we may better live our lives and be good examples and teachers to others around us. Lord, we want to say thank you for all the answered prayers that you've given us, for many of those that we've been praying for, with the health difficulties, the sicknesses, and so many of the good things that we've heard from those outcomes and the continued healing and growth in them. And we want to thank you for answering our prayers and offering good health and for those that we've been keeping an eye on. Lord, we also want to continue to ask for the prayers of for those that we're still keeping an eye on our prayer list, Wanda, and her health as she continues to progress and move on. We also ask for to be with Lori as she goes through surgery this week and is through the healing process through the next several weeks, and pray that you'll be with the doctors and those watching over her, and that she'll come through and heal appropriately to do that with. Lord, we also ask that you be with Randy and his family as they're traveling. Pray that you'll be with their families as he's going to visit his mom, and pray that you'll be with them during this time and difficulty. We pray that you will keep them safe and